Hello, welcome back to another episode of Coaching Conversations with Nick and Chris here. And today we're going to be deep diving into experiencing change in your business. If you're running a business right now and you want to see some form of greater change, whether it's greater sales results, greater marketing results, maybe greater team results, or even something personal at a personal entrepreneurial level, change is what we're going to be discussing today. But before we get into that, Nick, how are you this morning?
Well, very good. Fired, ready to go. Got a big week. Going to be traveling this week. Go see clients.
Yes,
which is awesome. And then next week after, we're getting ready for our 4 days.
We are going to be looking forward to strategy, planning, and masterminding as well for our clients, which is 2021, which is highly recommended for every other business owner right now to be starting to look forward and see what they need to be doing for next year for their business.
Exactly.
So today's topic, Nick, is something that we've come across in coaching. We discussed this last week. It's the idea of almost the business owner in some regards needing to change the way that they're operating or doing things so that they can step aside to a degree to let their business flourish, because sometimes they might be the anchor holding their business back. So your advice, your words, your thoughts on when should you step aside as a business owner and let the business or your business flow?
Yeah, great question. First of all, I think everybody needs to write this down. The only thing that's a constant is change itself. That's it. The only thing that's a constant is change itself. We're changing. I've changed. My appearance has changed. My health changed. My business changes. My house changes. My clothes change. Everything changes. And it makes logical sense that in any business, the business owner needs to change. If you want to change your business, if you want to advance it, if you want to grow it, if you want to, not have the shitty scenarios that businesses have, well, it makes sense that you change it. Now, it's pretty simple. If you're in a relationship with somebody and you absolutely hate being there and it's not working and you're just not compatible and all those things, even though maybe one day it was and you loved each other and it was fantastic, the only constant is change. So it's time to change because we change. And it's interesting where most business owners kind of get stuck in the same routine over and over again. They're the same person. They haven't adapted, haven't changed, and no wonder they're not getting the outcome that they want to. I know my sister works for a guy that still doesn't use computers. She keeps ledgers of all the stuff. This is a big business at the fruit markets that sells like millions of dollars worth of product a year. And he's still, old school because he thinks that somebody can hack into a computer and steal his data. Now, this is like, it's just unheard of. It's 2020. And
he must be the only guy in Sydney, I reckon.
In the world. Not even like,
wow.
If you're, an artisan in Austria making little Pinocchios, I'd go, all right, maybe crafting out of wood in a little town in Austria, I'll go, maybe. But this guy is a major distributor of product. Not even Excel, because he doesn't understand it. He wants it all on that, and he takes the books home every night. So it's just like he's so far behind the eight ball. It's just ridiculous.
Wow.
And he thinks that things are supposed to be all right. They can't steal from it that way. Of course they can. You just change the figures around. Like it's even
or someone next the books, and then you're in real trouble.
Yeah, exactly. So coming back to it, I think change is really, really constant. Now, how did we come up with this? I mean, Chris, we've been coaching for a long time now, thousands of clients that we've spoken to live and all that stuff. And the big thing that I find sometimes with businesses, the biggest roadblock or bottleneck is the business owner themselves. Hey, we know that we need to get this stuff done. You know that you need to get this stuff done. Without it, it's very hard for the business to progress. And without it, you're just going to keep where you are and stuck in the place that you are. And then the business owners is like, no, I'm not doing it. So, or dragging their heels. And let me give you a perfect example. I've got business owners that know that they need to concentrate on the business, do stuff on the business. But they're so stuck in, I need to be on site, or I need to, go out and get this stuff myself, or I need to unload this container at 2:00 in the morning, or any of these type of things, because nobody else can do it, that sometimes it's defeating the purpose to go, well, I don't know if you're really looking at it or because there's a problem. Now, I think change requires a particular approach. Most people, the reason why we're creatures of habit as humans, eat the same wheat bix every day with the same milk, with the same heated cocoa, with the same, all of these patterns that we have is because we get into routine and we train our mind and our body to get into that. So if I tell somebody to change, hey, instead of go the wheat bix, maybe go the, rice bubbles. People like rice bubbles. I've never had rice bubbles. I don't even know if I'm going to like rice bubbles.
Yeah.
Right. I heard somebody said, don't eat rice bubbles. My doctor said, wheat bix, like all of these things, it's like insane, right? Like all of these reasons why you can't. So I suppose the process in order to change, needs to be kind of adhered to, or else it's difficult to do it. So, and I think it's important that we start somewhere. It's really, really important. I think the first decision along this, so if you're somebody that you may not even realize that you're stopping your business from moving forward, because most people that don't change don't even realize that they're holding the business back.
And I think that's a very good point. There's probably business owners listening to this that don't realize that they are the ones slowing the chain on the business. The business is ready to scale, ready to grow. Right. They have a team that are chomping at the bit to take on more responsibility, but the business owner won't let go of that control, or again, their habits just
they're not even aware that this is it. Yeah,
that's right.
100% right. And it's interesting. People say to me, "Oh, dude, you like all this, rock and metal and all of this type of stuff, music." And I've got a wide variety of music choices. Obviously, I like music that I grew up with, 80s, 90s, that's my genre. But I'm also open to new stuff. Now, is it something that I'm into? Not necessarily into it, but I don't, go, well, it's absolutely shit and don't listen to it. I'm like, well, everything's got its merits. Now, in saying that, is it detrimental that I don't change in that area? And the answer is no. But if I'm running a business, it's a totally different construct. And a business needs to grow and adapt with the times. Think about it, where we are economically today as we're recording this. Think about COVID, the US presidential election, all of these things that are going on around us in the world that affect the business. So number one is awareness, are you even aware? And I think you need to ask these questions. First of all, is the business where you want it to be today? And if the answer is no, well, you go, okay, cool, let me just jot that down as number one. Number two, is everything solely responsible on you? It all comes back to you for every single little thing. And if the answer is yes, well, you might want to put another question mark against it, right? Step three, are you able to delegate without having to check it, 25 times, because you just feel fearful about it. And if the answer is no, there's another question mark, right?
Yep.
The next thing, can you scale with doing things the way that you're doing it right now? And if the answer once again is no, there's a question, right? So these are logical questions that you need to ask yourself. What next one? What happens if, God forbid, something happens to you in the business? Can the business continue? And the answer is, if it's a no, once again, there's a question mark. So these are levels of awareness. Have you been resistant to change previously, with software or, new personnel or doing things differently or any of these type of things? I think they're very, very logical questions that you need to ask yourself just around awareness. And, obviously we help businesses look at this. And it's very real. I think, probably 20 to 30% of businesses even that we deal with are in this scenario, and we're helping them through that. So that's number one is awareness. Part two to, I think, knowing whether you're the bottleneck or you're not, is the willingness to change. I think willingness to change is really important. Some people just don't like to rock the boat.
Right. Okay.
My mum, she's like curry prawns and rice for Chinese. That's it. Like there's no if, buts, or maybe.
Number 56. That's it. I don't want anything else.
And she's in her 80s and she can do curry prawns and rice, and that's how it is. But that's it. There's no chance. I'm like, Ma, try this. She's like, no, I just like the curry prawns and rice. I'm like, okay, cool. They're like that. I've learned to understand it. So the willingness for her to change in that area isn't strong. Now, has my mum changed where it came to going to the gym and working out? Absolutely. When my old man passed away, You know, she needed a new lease on life. She joined the gym, and she even gets T-shirts, 500. I'm like, "Ma, what's that?" She goes, "I've been to the gym 500 times this
Wow.
year." Like, it's insane. She's in her
That's
80s.
great.
Like, yeah. Do you know what I mean? So her willingness to change for that was pretty awesome. And so I think you've got to ask yourself, are you willing to change? Because even if you're not willing to change, or if you're not willing to change, maybe that's already giving you another indicator. Am I willing to change? No. Same thing.
Mm,
Question mark. Because
mm.
a business requires change. It's happening all around us. We used to write checks. My solicitor still checks and send me a fax. It's like crazy, right? 2020 a fax. I'm like, dude, did I still make those? He
Yeah.
goes, yeah, I think it's all the solicitors that keep buying faxes. Right, it's crazy, right? Like, it's the fax. I'm like, could you a checkbook? And I remember when I bought my house, I'm like, we have to get a check. I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't even have a checkbook.
You have to go to the bank
I
and
asked
them
my
for
brother-in-law for a checkbook, put money in his account to give me a check. To me,
Mm.
like, it feels weird. So once again, adaptability or the willingness to change, I think, is really, really, really important.
And I think on that, the willingness to change is driven from understanding what you want or understanding the reason or the purpose for wanting to do it.
Very much so.
You said step one is awareness, step two is willingness to change, but you really have to have that defined vision or reason for getting out of bed.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, well, I mean, why am I changing?
That's right. Why am I
Yeah.
changing? Why do I want to be willing to change?
Yeah, I think that the next step is, and by the way, there's 500 steps, but the next step is, is there a need for change? And let me give you an example. I mean, before COVID, let's think about it. If you're a cafe, gym owner, any of these type of things, pre-COVID, if all you did was, in restaurant or in cafe meals, breakfast and for lunch, and, you had obviously maybe some takeaway coffees, all that stuff, breakfast, all of that stuff, the need for you to adapt and change is very real. I mean, let's look at it. Cafes around the world today, we can just even go local here, like in Melbourne, you shut down for 3 months, almost 6 months. So you go, well, we need to do takeaway. So there's a big need for change. So whether you're, the bottleneck or you're not the bottleneck, now there's a bit of a scenario that says, hey, unless I actually change, I need to change, I'm going to lose my business. And this has happened. I mean, we had when my daughter used to go out to dancing 5 nights a week, they just didn't adapt. They took it sort of semi for granted. They did some online stuff. They didn't necessarily adapt. They weren't prepared for it. They had a typical business model that said, hey, kids come in. They weren't advertising. They were sort of sitting a bit fat, And, I don't know enough about the internals of it. It's only what I can see. And unfortunately, they've had to close down a successful business.
Yeah, right.
And to me, could that have been done, differently? I mean, we take our business as an example. Live touring is where, that's where all our revenue came from. All eggs in one basket. We needed to adapt. There was a need for change, and we got on that bandwagon well before any of the COVID stuff, so it didn't affect us. You know what I mean? And we changed our marketing around. We did a whole bunch of stuff, and the gods shine on us, and we're doing great. So it's one of those things that this isn't because we teach it, we know it all. We don't have a bloody crystal ball. Like it's and we're a business just like everybody else. So I think the need for that is really important. And I think the last part about whether you're the person that's the stick in the mud or you're not as a business owner is you said it perfectly. Do you have clear vision, or the word that we use, visioneering? Have you got a clear vision of where the business needs to go to, and what role do you play within that? Is all eggs in one basket? Is everything revolve around you? Are you not being technology savvy? Because today, tech innovation, or should I say, not just tech, but innovation in general, needs to be looked at. Perfect example of that, customers that, roofing company, we were doing, anything from booking in the job to material ordering to doing all that stuff on, goes from a phone call to a bit of paper to a computer to a bit of paper again to a file to the accounts department to the guy ordering materials, all on paper. I'm like, dude, why don't we just update the technology that you have, which is your software program. We've got a brand new software program that works absolutely mint, and everybody just looks into that and logs on, does their own piece, and it can order materials for you, can do all, do what's called drawing takeoffs, break it all down, get project management ready, all of these things just on one program. Like it makes 6 touches turn into 1 or 2. So efficiency wise, that level of planning and adaptability and innovation is really important. So in your visioneering process of, hey, this is what I want to get to, this is where I play a role, and can we innovate to be better? I mean, we know it with our company. We've been innovating. We've got the way that we present, the way that we present sales, the way that we've created that, the way that we've created a program for it, how we deliver the programs, all of these things that we've had to innovate, because it's different than seeing people live. So we went
very
from
much so
3.5 days of connection to 2.5 hours, so we've had to innovate.
And for people that are in their businesses, that's a different blend. So what you're speaking about there is having that purpose or the reason for it, but that doesn't come to you because you're doing the same thing day in, day out. There's that level of that first step, which is awareness. Do I require change in my business? Could there be an easier way for this? And then that third step, which is the need for change. Like, the roofing company that you mentioned, they're a perfect example. They're doing the same thing day in, day out, but I could only assume that the roofer or the guy that runs the company was doing the same thing year 1, year 2, year 3, year 10, year 12, whatever it was, but he's never really stood back and looked at it from an overview perspective and looked at it from an awareness perspective to go, I'm sick of doing these hours. I'm sick of filling out, 10 pieces of paper. What do I need to do differently to make that change?
Well, that's interesting, because most businesses, even though the business owner is the person that's, that is probably the person that needs to change the most, things are still happening. You're still making money, or you're still losing money. You still there's all of these things still happening. Like you still have to go out there and deliver the plumbing. You still have to go out there and purchase materials. So all of this stuff is still happening. That was still happening, except now the level of growth that's happening needs to require innovation, because now you could really tip over to a point of, shit, if we don't change, it's going to cost us. And if we continue that, cycle of it, it could cost us the company. Yes. Like I'm saying with the dance studio or cafes or any of that stuff. I mean, cafes just never innovated because they never even had the need to, like look at it today. I mean, things are different everywhere you go. You've got to check in. But it's also given rise to businesses that weren't there before, which is kind of cool, right? Like I like that part of it. Tech companies that have apps to sign in and plastic shielding and masks and all of these things that are the new world.
Yeah.
And here's the perfect, example of this. Less than 100 years ago, which isn't that long ago, right? In 1900s, every business was associated with something around agriculture. Every business on the planet was associated with something around agriculture. It's pretty insane when you think about that.
Wow.
Before that, the next big evolution was that we found refrigeration. So Corsair, companies like Corsair, Birdseye, they were the two big innovators where they could create change in a building that made it a fridge. Right? No, massive buildings, right? These big compressor things in there. You can check this out. It's pretty amazing. And then they compressed it down to, we can move transport in trains. And then we can move transport in trucks. I mean, trucks came later, but trains that could be refrigerated, which opened up literally the globe. Because now I didn't have to be where I was farming. I could be, as an example, in Wisconsin farming, but I can be in New York living, so I could transport stuff. And these guys were giants, like oil giants, and they still are. Corsair, all the refrigeration companies. And how did they do it? They went to, places where Eskimos lived, and they figured out, how could we, refrigerate stuff, because Eskimos were storing stuff for like a year. Whales and all of these things. It's pretty insane when you look at this. So could you imagine if you were the owner of that and you're like, no, it's not going to really happen. No, I don't want to change. I like it that the butcher just cuts it for me fresh. All I like that's spurred global change. And it's the same today. Things are spurring global change, but there's a need for innovation. So do you know sometimes you think that you're doing the right thing by holding everything back, or you're not even aware that you're holding it back. But the truth of the matter is, for your business or everybody else around you, it actually could spur on a whole amazingness of change.
That's right. Yeah. And I was looking at that from it when you were speaking, like a two-sided coin here. Not that I'm into fear mongering or anything, but what if you're not open to change or open to improving through innovation, research and development or whatever, because your competition could be like, what are you not doing? What is your competition doing now that may even take your customers as a result in the future? That's one side. The other side is, if you do look to innovate the way that you're doing things and shift your way of thinking with your business, what sort of possibilities could open up? And that you just mentioned it there. It opens up to new worlds of reality or new worlds of opportunity for you to grow your business, purely because the business owner, i.e. you, if you're listening or watching this, is thinking slightly differently about understanding what can I be doing differently, or am I getting in the way of my business's success?
Yeah, that's a great point. As you're saying that, something came to mind as well. As an example, just having a discussion with a coach could give you the possibility of, oh, here's what I see. Perfect example. We just spoke to somebody that looks like they're coming on, and I said, for 10 years, you've had this business. You're a hostage to it. And they're like, what? I'm like, well, you've told me 4 times you can never take a day off. You told me more than 4 times that you're there 12 to 15 hours, 7 days a week. You told me that you can never go away on holidays, that you come back to a disaster. And this is a multi-million-dollar business. I'm like, so let me just ask you, do you want more of that? Because if you do, just keep on doing whatever you're doing, and you're just going to get more of that. Yep. But the courage that they had for us to even have a phone call with them, had another 200 businesses say no, we don't need to. No, coaches, like all of these things. So do you see some people, there's, I suppose we could add to that, the misconception of the truth. Most people have got a misconception that they don't even know that, they're the ones that are holding the innovation back. And the only reason being is somebody else said to them, if you work hard, your business will be successful. Well, we know it's not about the work. If hard work equals success, man, that'd be like a billion trillionaires. Don't you reckon?
That's right.
I don't know any small business owner that doesn't work hard, or medium bill, big, or any business owner in general, whether you're a $1 billion business or you're not. I know I've hung out with billionaires, and they work hard. So it's not that. So I suppose the goal around that is to go, well, at least have the courage to sit with somebody that's a professional that can at least look in and just give you some advice, or not advice, just give you some mirror reflections of going, well, if all of these things aren't lining up, maybe it could be something that changes. And we know we've had a client that it doesn't matter, it looks like everybody else is the enemy, without mentioning names, right? Doesn't matter. Oh no, it was them. It's like, dude, maybe it was you. Could there possibly be a possibility that that it was you, not everybody else? It seems like it's recurring.
Yeah. And I think we'll wrap up the convo around this, which is sometimes it's easier from a coaching perspective because we can look in with an unbiased view and maybe inform or even tell the business owner what they can't possibly see, but we can also open opportunities for the future for what's possible. And that comes kind of full circle with looking at sometimes that business owner needs to get out of their own way for their business to grow, not in a negative way. They just need to start looking at things in a different perspective. That's the greatest benefit, I think, of speaking to a coach. And if you want to speak to us, reach out to us at askitupcoach.com.au. We'll even book in a free strategy session with you. It's free for 30 minutes, and we can map out, or solve a couple of challenges that you might have, or map out the future for 2021 for yourself. But that's the greatest benefit of speaking to someone like ourselves about opening up possibilities within the business. And sometimes, if I noted on what you were speaking about just before, Nick, if you're a business owner that you are doing 7 days a week and you work 15 hours a day and you don't get to see your family and you've never had a holiday in 4, 5, 7, 10 years, maybe there's an issue there. maybe that's something that you should be thinking about and create. Number one, create some awareness around to go, hey, there are other people that have successful businesses that aren't doing the same amount of hard work as you might be. So sometimes change requires change, just like you mentioned, Nick. Change is always a constant, and I hope you wrote that down at the beginning. Thank you so much for your time again, Nick, today.
Awesome. Great topic. I mean, we could speak for hours on this one.
We really could. But if you have any questions or would like some help, reach out to us at askitupcoach.com.au. Be happy to help you, and we'll see you and speak to you all again next week.
Bye for now.
Bye now.